I was sitting at our kitchen table, sipping my morning coffee and grading papers when Mark walked in. He kissed me on the cheek and poured himself a cup, just another ordinary Tuesday in our suburban home. "Morning, honey," I said, glancing up from my work. "Don't forget Lily has her dance recital this afternoon." Mark nodded, his attention already on his phone. "Got it. I'll be there." I watched him for a moment, taking in his slightly disheveled hair and the faint shadows under his eyes. He'd been working late a lot recently, coming home well after dinner most nights. I told myself it was just a busy period at the accounting firm, but a tiny seed of doubt had started to take root in my mind. Pushing those thoughts aside, I finished my coffee and headed to work. As I drove to the high school where I taught history, I couldn't help but smile. Despite the long hours Mark had been putting in lately, we had a good life. A beautiful home, a wonderful daughter, and 10 years of marriage under our belts. What more could I ask for? The school day flew by, and before I knew it, I was rushing to pick up Lily from her after-school program. We made it to the community center just in time for her recital. As we walked in, I scanned the crowd for Mark, but he was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Daddy?" Lily asked, her big brown eyes looking up at me. "He'll be here soon, sweetie," I assured her, even as I felt a twinge of annoyance. "He probably just got held up at work." The recital started, and still, no sign of Mark. I watched Lily twirl and leap across the stage, my heart swelling with pride. But part of me couldn't help feeling disappointed that Mark was missing this moment. As the final notes of music faded and the audience burst into applause, I felt my phone vibrate. A text from Mark. "So sorry, got caught up in a meeting. How did it go?" I sighed, typing back a quick response. "She was amazing. Wish you could have seen it." That night, after Lily was in bed, I confronted Mark. "You promised you'd be there," I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely remorseful. "I know. I'm sorry. Things have been crazy at work lately. I'll make it up to her. I promise." I wanted to be angry, but the sincerity in his eyes made me soften. "Okay," I said, leaning in to kiss him. "Just try not to let it happen again, all right?" He nodded, pulling me into a hug. As I rested my head on his shoulder, I caught a whiff of something different, a perfume that wasn't mine. But before I could process it, Mark was pulling away, heading to the shower. I stood there for a moment, that seed of doubt in my mind starting to grow. But I pushed it down, telling myself I was being paranoid. Mark loved me. He loved our family. Everything was fine. As I got ready for bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I told myself it was nothing. After all, we had a good life, a happy marriage. What did I have to worry about? Little did I know, that night was the beginning of a journey that would turn my entire world upside down. A journey that would test me in ways I never imagined, but ultimately lead me to discover a strength I never knew I had. I wish I could say that the missed recital was just a one-time thing, but over the next few weeks, I started noticing other little changes in Mark's behavior. It was like a shift had occurred, so subtle at first that I almost didn't catch it. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I heard Mark's key in the lock. He walked in, his tie loosened and his shirt slightly wrinkled. "Hey, you're home early," I said. Surprised, he usually didn't make it back before 7 these days. "Yeah, the meeting got canceled," he mumbled, barely looking at me as he headed straight for the liquor cabinet. I frowned, watching as he poured himself a generous glass of whiskey. "Everything okay?" I asked, stirring the pasta sauce. "Fine," he replied curtly, taking a long sip. "Just a long day." I wanted to press further, but something in his tone made me hesitate. Instead, I changed the subject. "Well, I'm glad you're home. Lily's been asking about you. Maybe we could all watch a movie after dinner." He nodded absently, his attention already on his phone. I noticed he angled the screen away from me slightly as he typed out a message. During dinner, Mark was quieter than usual, picking at his food. Lily chatted away about her day at school, but I could tell Mark was only half listening. "Daddy, can we watch Frozen?" Lily asked excitedly as I cleared the plates. Mark glanced at his watch. "Sorry, Pumpkin. I've got some work to finish up, maybe another night." Lily's face fell, and I felt a flicker of irritation. "Mark, you just got home. Surely work can wait?" He shot me a look that I couldn't quite decipher. "It can't, actually. I've got a big presentation tomorrow." Before I could respond, he was already heading to his home office, shutting the door behind him. I tried to push down my disappointment as I settled on the couch with Lily to watch the movie. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Over the next few days, I started noticing other little things. Mark's cologne smelled different, spicier, more expensive. He was spending more time in front of the mirror in the mornings, fussing with his hair and clothes in a way he never used to. One afternoon, I was folding laundry when I noticed a small stain on the collar of one of Mark's white shirts. It looked like lipstick, but a shade I didn't own. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart pounding. Then I shook my head, telling myself it must be something else. Maybe sauce from lunch, but the doubts kept creeping in. Mark was working later and later, often not coming home until well after Lily and I had gone to bed. When he was home, he was distracted, constantly checking his phone with a small smile playing on his lips. I tried to talk to him about it one night after Lily was asleep. "Mark, is everything okay? You seem distant lately." He looked up from his laptop, a flicker of something, guilt, annoyance, crossing his face before he smiled. "Everything's fine, Sarah. Just busy at work. You know how it is." I nodded, not entirely convinced. I miss you. We miss you. Maybe we could plan a family day this weekend." "Sure," he said, but his tone was non-committal. "I'll check my schedule." As I lay in bed that night, listening to Mark's steady breathing beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. But I pushed it down, telling myself I was being paranoid. Mark loved me. He loved our family. This was just a busy period at work. Things would go back to normal soon. But deep down, a part of me knew that things were changing. I just wasn't ready to face what that might mean. As the weeks went by, I couldn't ignore the growing pit in my stomach. Mark's behavior was becoming more and more suspicious, and I found myself constantly on edge, analyzing his every move. One Saturday morning, I was making pancakes for Lily when Mark stumbled into the kitchen, looking disheveled and smelling faintly of alcohol. "Late night?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. He grunted, heading straight for the coffee maker. "Yeah, work stuff, you know how it is." I bit my lip, fighting back the urge to point out that work stuff doesn't usually involve coming home at 3 a.m. reeking of booze and perfume. Instead, I focused on flipping the pancakes, my mind racing. "Daddy, can we go to the park today?" Lily chirped, her mouth full of syrupy goodness. Mark winced, rubbing his temples. "Not today, sweetie. Daddy's got a headache." I saw Lily's face fall and felt a surge of anger. "Mark, you promised we'd have a family day," I said, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. He shot me an irritated look. "I said I'd check my schedule. Something came up." "Something always comes up lately," I muttered under my breath. "What was that?" Mark snapped. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile for Lily's sake. "Nothing, Lily. Why don't you go get dressed?" "I'll take you to the park." As soon as Lily was out of earshot, I turned to Mark. "What's going on with you? You're never home. And when you are, you're distant and irritable." He rolled his eyes. "Not this again, Sarah. I told you, work's been crazy." "So crazy that you can't spare a few hours for your daughter on a Saturday?" "Don't start," he warned, his voice low. "I'm the one bringing in most of the money here. Someone's got to pay for this house and Lily's dance lessons." His words stung, and I felt tears pricking at my eyes. "Is that all we are to you now? A financial obligation?" Mark's expression softened slightly. "Of course not. I'm sorry. I'm just stressed. I'll make it up to you both. I promise." I wanted to believe him, but the doubt was growing stronger by the day. That night, after Lily was in bed, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I waited until Mark was in the shower, then grabbed his phone from the nightstand. My hands shook as I tried to unlock it, but of course, the password had been changed. I stared at the screen, a mix of frustration and suspicion washing over me. When had he changed it? And more importantly, why? Just then, a notification popped up. A text message from someone named Karen, HR. The preview read, "Can't wait to see you, Tom." My heart dropped. Karen from HR. The same Karen he'd mentioned working late with a few times. Before I could process this, I heard the shower turn off. I quickly put the phone back and pretended to be reading when Mark came out. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my flushed face. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As we got ready for bed, my mind was in overdrive. Who was Karen? Why was she texting my husband at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night? And why did the thought of them together make me feel sick to my stomach? The next morning, I woke up early, my head pounding from a restless night. Mark was still asleep, his arm thrown carelessly over my side of the bed. I gently moved it and got up, heading to the kitchen for some coffee. As I sipped the hot brew, I found myself staring at the family photos on our fridge. Mark and I on our wedding day, both of us beaming. Lily's first day of school, Mark proudly holding her hand. When had things changed so much? I heard movement upstairs and quickly wiped away the tears I hadn't realized were falling. A few minutes later, Mark came down, already dressed in a suit. "You're going to work?" "It's Sunday," I said, unable to keep the accusation out of my voice. He barely glanced at me as he poured his coffee. "Yeah, big project. Gotta get it done." "With Karen from HR?" The words were out before I could stop them. Mark froze, then slowly turned to face me. "What?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I saw a text from her last night. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." "Care to explain?" For a moment, something like panic flashed in Mark's eyes. Then his expression hardened. "You were snooping through my phone." "Don't turn this around on me," I said, my voice shaking. "What's going on, Mark? And don't tell me it's just work." He stared at me for a long moment, then sighed. It's a surprise, okay? Karen's helping me plan something for our anniversary next month. I didn't want to ruin it. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But the knot in my stomach only tightened. Our anniversary wasn't for another 3 months. "Mark, I've got to go," he cut me off, grabbing his keys. "We'll talk later, okay?" Before I could respond, he was out the door. I stood there in our suddenly too quiet kitchen, feeling like my whole world was shifting beneath my feet. One thing was clear, I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them by just waiting around. After Mark left that Sunday morning, I spent hours pacing our house, my mind racing with possibilities. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was lying about Karen and the surprise. Something just didn't add up. By Monday afternoon, I'd made up my mind. If Mark wasn't going to give me straight answers, I'd have to find them myself. I hated the idea of snooping, but I couldn't stand the uncertainty anymore. As soon as my last class finished, I rushed home, knowing Mark wouldn't be back for hours. I headed straight for his home office, my heart pounding as I opened the door. "Okay, Sarah," I muttered to myself. "Where would you hide something if you didn't want me to find it?" I started with his desk drawers, rifling through papers and old receipts. Nothing suspicious jumped out at me. Next, I checked his filing cabinet, but it was just full of boring financial documents and old tax returns. I was about to give up when I noticed something odd about the bookshelf behind his desk. One of the books, a thick hardcover about accounting principles, was slightly out of alignment with the others. My hands trembling, I pulled it out. To my surprise, it wasn't a real book at all, but a hollow box designed to look like one. Inside was a small stack of papers. I pulled them out, my stomach churning as I realized what I was looking at. Credit card statements. For an account I didn't know existed, With shaking hands, I flipped through them. Expensive restaurants, hotel charges, jewelry stores. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. This couldn't be happening. Just then, I heard the front door open. Panic shot through me as I heard Mark's voice. "Sarah, you home?" Quickly, I shoved the statements back into the fake book and put it on the shelf. I had just closed the office door behind me when Mark appeared at the end of the hallway. "Hey," he said, looking surprised. "What are you doing home so early?" I forced a smile, hoping he couldn't see how badly I was shaking. "Oh, I had a headache. Thought I'd come home and lie down for a bit." He nodded, seemingly accepting my explanation. "Well, I forgot some files I need for a meeting. I'll just grab them and head back out." As he brushed past me to enter his office, I held my breath, praying I hadn't left any sign of my snooping. After what felt like an eternity, he emerged with a folder in hand. "Feel better," he said, giving me a quick peck on the cheek before heading out again. As soon as the door closed behind him, I sagged against the wall, my mind reeling. What was I going to do with this information? That night, after a quiet dinner where I barely tasted the food, I lay in bed wide awake, listening to Mark's steady breathing beside me. How could he sleep so peacefully while our marriage was falling apart? The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face my students, not with the turmoil raging inside me. As soon as Mark left for work, I was back in his office, poring over those credit card statements. The more I looked, the worse it got. There were charges for flowers, delivered to an address I didn't recognize. A receipt for a weekend getaway at a luxury resort, dated for a time when Mark had told me he was at a conference. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and did a quick search for the name on the credit card. It was a woman's name I didn't recognize. Was this Karen or someone else entirely? I spent the rest of the day in a daze, alternating between fits of anger and bouts of uncontrollable tears. By the time I heard Mark's key in the lock that evening, I had worked myself into a state of nervous anticipation. "Sarah?" he called out as he entered. "You feeling better?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "We need to talk," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Mark froze, his eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route. Can it wait? I've got a lot of work to finish up." "No," I said firmly. "It can't wait. Sit down." "Mark." He hesitated for a moment, then slowly lowered himself onto the couch across from me. "What's this about?" I looked at him, really looked at him, searching for any trace of the man I had fallen in love with. All I saw was a stranger, his face a mask of carefully controlled neutrality. "I know about the credit card," I said, watching his reaction closely. "I know about the hotels, the flowers, the weekend trips." For a split second, panic flashed in Mark's eyes. Then his face hardened. "You went through my things," he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare try to turn this around on me," I snapped, anger surging through me. "Who is she, Mark? Is it Karen, or is there someone else?" He stood up abruptly, running a hand through his hair. "This is ridiculous. I'm not having this conversation." As he turned to leave, something inside me snapped. I grabbed his arm, forcing him to face me. "No, you don't get to walk away from this. I deserve answers, Mark. After 10 years of marriage, I deserve the truth." For a long moment, we stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Then, slowly, Mark's shoulders sagged. "It's not what you think," he said quietly. I laughed bitterly. "Really? Because what I think is that you've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, and spending money we don't have on God knows what, or who." Mark sighed, sinking back onto the couch. "It's complicated, Sarah. I've been under a lot of pressure at work. Things haven't been going well, and I made some bad decisions." I stared at him, waiting for more. When he didn't continue, I pressed, "What kind of bad decisions?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. I got involved in some things I shouldn't have. Investments that didn't pan out. I was trying to fix it before you found out. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. So all this, the late nights, the secretive behavior, it wasn't an affair. Mark shook his head. No, it wasn't an affair. But I've put us in a bad situation, Sarah. I didn't know how to tell you. As relief warred with a new kind of fear inside me, I sank down next to him on the couch. Oh, Mark, I whispered. What have you done? I wanted to believe Mark. God, how I wanted to believe him. The idea that all of this was about bad investments rather than an affair should have been a relief, but something still didn't sit right with me. Tell me everything, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. It started a few months ago. A client told me about this amazing investment opportunity. High risk, but potentially huge returns. I thought I could make enough to pay off our mortgage, maybe even put Lily through college. I listened, my heart sinking with every word. This didn't sound like the cautious, responsible Mark I knew. At first, it seemed to be working, he continued. I was seeing returns, so I invested more. But then, things went south, fast. I tried to recover the losses, but I just kept digging myself deeper. How much? I asked, dreading the answer. Mark wouldn't meet my eyes. Almost everything we have, our savings, my 401k. I even took out a second mortgage on the house. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Mark, how could you? How could you risk everything without talking to me? I was going to fix it, he insisted, a hint of desperation in his voice. I've been working with Karen from HR to try and get a promotion, maybe a bonus. That's why I've been working so late. I was going to surprise you when I had it all sorted out. It sounded plausible. It really did. But something still nagged at me. And the hotel charges, the flowers. Mark hesitated for just a second too long. Business meetings, trying to schmooze clients to get more accounts. I wanted to believe him. But the seed of doubt had taken root, and it was growing faster than I could control. The next few days were tense. Mark was suddenly attentive, coming home early and helping with Lily, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. One afternoon, while Mark was at work, I decided to do some digging. I called our bank, pretending to be confused about some recent transactions. The customer service rep was helpful, walking me through our account activity. And what about the transfer to the savings account last week? I asked casually. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but I don't see any recent transfers to your savings account. In fact, it looks like that account was closed about 3 months ago. My blood ran cold. Our savings account closed without my knowledge. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table, my mind reeling. Mark had lied. Again. But why? If he really had lost all our money in bad investments, why lie about the savings account? I spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through the motions of grading papers and making dinner. When Mark came home, I could barely look at him. Everything okay? He asked, noticing my mood. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, I lay awake long after Mark had fallen asleep, my mind racing. I needed proof, real, concrete proof of what was going on. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to find answers. While Mark was in the shower, I grabbed his phone. To my surprise, it wasn't locked. Had he forgotten to set the password? Or was this a peace offering? A show of transparency? With shaking hands, I opened his messages. There were dozens from Karen, but they were all about work. Meeting times, client names, nothing suspicious. I was about to put the phone down when a new message popped up. It was from a number not saved in his contacts. The preview read, "Miss you already. Can't wait for our next..." My heart pounding. I opened the message thread. What I saw made my blood run cold. Flirtatious messages, intimate photos, plans for secret meetups. This wasn't Karen. This was someone else entirely. I heard the shower turn off and quickly put the phone back. When Mark came out, I was sitting on the bed, trying to control my shaking. "You okay, honey?" he asked, looking concerned. "You look pale." I forced a smile. "Just a bit of a headache. I think I'll stay home today." He nodded, leaning down to kiss my forehead. "Feel better. I'll try to come home early." As soon as he left, I broke down. The lies. The deceit. It was all too much. But beneath the hurt and betrayal, a new emotion was rising. Anger. I spent the day alternating between crying and furiously planning my next move. By the time Mark came home, I had composed myself. "Hey," he said, smiling as he walked in. "How are you feeling?" I looked at him. This man I thought I knew so well. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. Mark's smile faltered. "Okay, what about?" I took a deep breath, all pretense of innocence gone. I swallowed hard. "Does it matter? Just tell me why, Mark. Why would you do this to us?" He sank into a chair, suddenly looking much older than his 38 years. "I don't know, Sarah. It just happened. I wasn't happy. I felt stuck. And then I met her, and..." I held up a hand, unable to bear hearing more. "Stop. Just stop." We sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, I spoke. "I want you out, Mark. Tonight." I can't even look at you right now." He nodded, not meeting my eyes. As he packed a bag, I sat on our bed, feeling numb. How had we gotten here? How had our life together unraveled so completely? After Mark left, I curled up on the bed, letting the tears flow freely. But as I cried, I felt something else stirring inside me, a determination, a resolve. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And I was going to come out stronger, no matter what it took. The days following Mark's departure were a blur of tears, sleepless nights, and difficult conversations with Lily. I tried to shield her from the worst of it, but she was a perceptive child. She knew something was terribly wrong. "When is Daddy coming home?" she asked one night as I tucked her into bed. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I'm not sure, sweetie. Daddy and we need some time apart right now." Lily's lower lip trembled, and I needed a plan. The next morning, after dropping Lily off at school, I headed to the bank. I needed to know exactly what our financial situation was. The bank manager's face was grim as he went through our accounts. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but it appears that most of your joint savings have been withdrawn over the past few months." I nodded, my suspicions confirmed. "And our mortgage?" He hesitated. "There's a second mortgage on your home that was taken out recently. The payments, they're behind." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could Mark have done this? How could he have risked our home, our future? As I left the bank, my head spinning, I made a decision. I needed help, professional help. I called a lawyer friend of mine, explaining the situation. She recommended a colleague who specialized in divorce cases involving financial deception. "Sarah," the lawyer said when we met later that day, "what your husband has done is not just morally wrong, it's potentially illegal. We need to act fast to protect your assets and your rights." We spent hours going over everything: the hidden credit card statements, the drained savings accounts, the second mortgage. With each revelation, I felt a strange mix of heartbreak and determination growing inside me. "What do I do now?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. Either Mark had gotten careless, or he'd never thought I'd look. As I scrolled through his emails, my hands shaking, I found what I was looking for: correspondence with the woman he'd been seeing. Her name was Rebecca, and from what I could gather, she worked at a rival accounting firm. There were emails about secret meetings, about business trips that were actually romantic getaways. But what really caught my eye were the financial discussions. "Don't worry about the money," one email from Mark read. "I've got it covered. We'll be living the high life soon enough." I felt sick. He'd been planning to leave us, to start a new life with her, funded by our family's savings. I printed out everything I could find, my anger growing with each page. But as I was about to shut down the computer, a folder caught my eye. It was labeled offshore. My heart pounding, I opened it. Inside were documents detailing offshore accounts, investments I'd never known about. This wasn't just about an affair. This was fraud on a massive scale. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. "Hello." My lawyer's voice came through, groggy with sleep. "I found something," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Something big." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I met with forensic accountants, provided statements to investigators, and tried to keep it together for Lily's sake. Mark tried to contact me several times, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to angry. I ignored them all, focusing instead on building my case. One evening, as I was going through yet another stack of financial documents, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Stay away from Mark. You have no idea what you're getting into." I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. Was this her, Rebecca? Before I could decide how to respond, another text came through. "If you know what's good for you and your daughter, you'll drop this now." Anger surged through me, replacing the fear. How dare she threaten my child? I called my lawyer immediately. "I'm being threatened," I said as soon as she picked up. "I think it's the woman Mark's been seeing." "Save those messages," she instructed. "It will add witness intimidation to the list of charges." As I hung up, I felt a strange calm settle over me. They thought they could scare me into backing down. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I looked at the framed photo of Lily on my desk, her gap-toothed smile beaming at me. I was doing this for her, for our future, and I wasn't going to let anyone stand in my way. I picked up my phone and typed out a response. "I'm not afraid of you, and I'm not backing down. Bring it on." As I hit send, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just about saving myself anymore. This was about justice, and I was going to fight with everything I had. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I felt like I was living a double life. Caring mom by day, amateur detective by night. Every spare moment was spent digging deeper into Mark's deception, and with each new discovery, my resolve strengthened. One evening, after putting Lily to bed, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by stacks of papers, bank statements, credit card bills, and printouts of suspicious emails covered every inch of the surface. I rubbed my tired eyes, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer volume of evidence. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my lawyer. "Big break. Call me ASAP." My heart racing, I dialed her number. "What is it?" I asked as soon as she picked up. "We found the smoking gun," she said, excitement evident in her voice. "Remember those offshore accounts you discovered? We've traced a series of large transfers from your joint accounts to those offshore ones, and then from there to a separate account in Rebecca's name." I gasped. So he wasn't just having an affair. He was embezzling funds and funneling them to her, my lawyer finished. "This is huge, Sarah. We're not just talking about divorce proceedings anymore. This is criminal territory." As I hung up, a mix of emotions washed over me. Relief that we finally had concrete proof, anger at Mark's betrayal, and a strange sense of vindication. I hadn't been crazy or paranoid after all. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to find the final piece of the puzzle. I knew Mark kept a personal diary. I'd seen him writing in it countless times over the years. If I could find it, it might contain the confession we needed to nail this case shut. I searched every inch of the house while Lily was at school. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed something odd about the floorboards in Mark's closet. One of them seemed slightly loose. My hands shaking with anticipation, I pried it up. There, nestled in a small hidden compartment, was a leather-bound journal. I sat right there on the closet floor and began to read. Page after page detailed Mark's affair, his financial schemes, his plans to leave us. It was all there in black and white, written in his own hand. Tears streamed down my face as I read the entry from our last anniversary. Dinner with Sarah tonight. She has no idea what's coming. Soon, I'll be free of this suffocating life, free to be with Rebecca. Just a few more months of playing the dutiful husband and father, then I'm out. I clutched the journal to my chest, sobs racking my body. How could he have been so cold, so calculating? How long had he been planning this? As I flipped through the final pages, something fell out, a USB drive. With trembling hands, I plugged it into my laptop. What I found made my blood run cold. Detailed plans for embezzling even more money from his firm, fake identities, plans for a new life abroad. I called my lawyer immediately. "I've found something," I said, my voice shaking. "Something big." She arrived within the hour, her eyes widening as I showed her the journal and the contents of the USB drive. "Sarah," she said, her voice serious, "this is beyond anything we imagined. We need to take this to the authorities immediately." The next few days passed in a blur. Meetings with detectives, giving statements, handing over evidence. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Then came the day I'd been both dreading and anticipating, the confrontation with Mark. It happened at our lawyer's office. As I walked in, I saw him for the first time in weeks. He looked haggard, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Then I remembered everything he'd done, and my resolve hardened. "Sarah," he said, his voice pleading, "can we talk about this? I can explain everything." I looked at him, really looked at him, searching for any trace of the man I'd fallen in love with. All I saw was a stranger. "There's nothing to talk about, Mark," I said, my voice steady. "We have the offshore account records, we have the journal, we have everything." The color drained from his face. You found the journal?" I nodded, watching as the realization of what this meant dawned on him. "Sarah, please," he begged, reaching for my hand. "Think about Lily. Think about our family." I jerked my hand away, anger surging through me. "Don't you dare bring Lily into this. You lost the right to talk about our family when you decided to steal from us, to betray us." Just then, the door opened and 2 police officers walked in. "Mark Thompson," one of them said, "we have a warrant for your arrest." As they read him his rights, Mark's eyes never left mine. I saw a mix of emotions there, fear, anger, and something that might have been regret. But it was too late for that now. As they led him away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. There would be trials, both criminal and divorce proceedings. There would be difficult conversations with Lily, financial hurdles to overcome. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My lawyer put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Sarah. You stood up for yourself and your daughter. You should be proud." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. "What happens now?" I asked. She smiled. Now we fight, and we win." As I left the office that day, I felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. The life I'd known was over, shattered by betrayal and lies. But from those broken pieces, I was going to build something new, something stronger. I thought of Lily waiting for me at home, my brave, beautiful girl. I was going to show her what it meant to be strong, to stand up for yourself, to never let anyone make you feel small. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. The day of Mark's arraignment arrived faster than I expected. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my blazer, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the naive, trusting wife. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had been forged in the fires of betrayal and deceit. "Mommy," Lily's small voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Do you have to go?" I knelt down, pulling her into a tight hug. "Yes, sweetie. Mommy has to go to court today." Remember we talked about this. It's to make sure Daddy takes responsibility for the bad things he did. Her lower lip trembled. But what if they take him away forever? My heart clenched. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that her father might go to prison? Oh, honey, I sighed, stroking her hair. I don't know what's going to happen, but no matter what, I promise I'll always be here for you. After dropping Lily off at my sister's house, I made my way to the courthouse. My palms were sweaty as I climbed the steps, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Inside, the courtroom was a buzz of activity. I spotted Mark sitting at the defendant's table, looking pale and drawn in his suit. Our eyes met for a brief moment before he quickly looked away. "All rise," the bailiff called out as the judge entered. The proceedings began, a blur of legal jargon and formalities. I listened as the charges were read out: embezzlement, money laundering, fraud. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. How could the man I'd loved, the father of my child, have done all this? When it came time for Mark to enter his plea, the room fell silent. I held my breath, waiting. "How do you plead, Mr. Thompson?" the judge asked. Mark stood, his voice barely audible. "Guilty, Your Honor." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. I felt lightheaded, gripping the bench in front of me for support. He was pleading guilty, just like that. As the judge set a date for sentencing and the courtroom began to clear, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my lawyer. "Sarah," she said gently. "Mark's attorney wants to speak with us. Are you up for it?" I nodded, steeling myself. We were led to a small conference room where Mark and his lawyer were waiting. Mark looked up as we entered, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. "Sarah," he began, his voice cracking, I'm so sorry for everything." I stared at him, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "Sorry doesn't begin to cover it, Mark. You destroyed our family. You betrayed us in the worst possible way." He nodded, hanging his head. "I know, that's why I'm pleading guilty. I don't want to drag this out any longer. I don't want to put you and Lily through a trial." His lawyer cleared his throat. "We're prepared to offer a full confession and cooperation in exchange for leniency in sentencing. We're also willing to sign over all remaining assets to Sarah and Lily as restitution." My lawyer and I exchanged glances. This was more than we'd hoped for, but could I trust anything Mark said or offered at this point? "Why should I believe you?" I asked, my voice hard. "You've lied about everything else." Mark looked up, meeting my eyes. "Because I've lost everything that ever mattered to me. My family, my career, my freedom. The least I can do is try to make things right." I felt tears pricking at my eyes and blinked them away furiously. I wouldn't let him see me cry, not now. "I need time to think about this," I said, standing up. "I need to consider what's best for Lily." As I turned to leave, Mark called out, "Sarah, wait. There's something else you should know." I paused at the door, not turning around. "Rebecca," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's pregnant." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the doorframe, struggling to breathe. Pregnant. There was going to be another child, an innocent baby caught up in all of this mess. I left without another word, my mind reeling. Outside the courthouse, I gulped in the fresh air, trying to calm my racing heart. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister asking how it went. I stared at the screen, unsure how to even begin explaining everything that had just happened. As I drove to pick up Lily, my emotions swirled like a storm. Anger at Mark for this final betrayal, pity for the child who would be born into this chaos, and underneath it all, a strange sense of relief. It was over. No more lies, no more pretending. When I arrived at my sister's house, Lily ran to me, throwing her arms around my waist. "Mommy, is everything okay? Is Daddy coming home?" I knelt down, looking into her innocent eyes. How could I explain any of this to her? "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "Daddy's not coming home, but you and we're going to be okay, I promise." As we drove home, Lily chattering away in the back seat about her day, I made a decision. We couldn't change the past, but we could shape our future. And I was determined to make it a bright one, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat on our back porch, staring up at the stars. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. The road ahead would be tough, but I was stronger now. I had weathered the storm, and I was still standing. As I sipped my tea, I made a silent vow to myself and to Lily. We would not just survive this, we would thrive. And someday, when Lily was old enough to understand, I would tell her our story. A story of betrayal, yes, but also of resilience, strength, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. With a deep breath, I stood up and went inside. Tomorrow was a new day, the first day of our new life, and I was ready to face it head on. The weeks following Mark's plea were a blur of emotions. Some days, I felt strong and determined. Others, I could barely get out of bed. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the legal battles, the uncertain future, felt crushing. One particularly rough morning, I found myself sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by unpaid bills and divorce papers, sobbing uncontrollably. That's how Lily found me when she came down for breakfast. "Mommy," her small voice cut through my despair. "Why are you crying?" I quickly wiped my eyes, trying to compose myself. "Oh, sweetie, Mommy's just having a tough day. But it's okay. Everything's going to be okay." Lily sat down next to me, her little hand patting my arm. "Don't be sad, Mommy. We can have pancakes. Pancakes make everything better." I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. "You're right, baby. Pancakes do make everything better." As we made breakfast together, flour dusting our cheeks and giggles filling the kitchen, I felt a spark of hope ignite in my chest. We would get through this. We had to. But the reality of our situation was never far from my mind. The next day, I had a meeting with my lawyer to discuss the financial implications of Mark's plea deal. "The good news," she said, shuffling through papers, "is that Mark's cooperation means we can avoid a lengthy trial. The bad news is, well, there's no easy way to say this. The financial damage is extensive." I nodded, bracing myself. "How bad?" She sighed. "The embezzlement was significant. Most of your joint assets have been seized or frozen. The house... I'm sorry, Sarah, but there's a good chance you'll have to sell it to cover the debts and legal fees." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Our house, the home where Lily took her first steps, where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases, the thought of losing it was almost unbearable. "What about child support?" I asked, my voice shaking. "With Mark likely facing prison time, that's going to be complicated. We'll fight for it. But realistically, you need to prepare for the possibility that you'll be shouldering most of the financial burden for a while." As I left her office, my mind was racing. How was I going to manage? My teacher's salary barely covered our expenses as it was, and now, with everything that had happened. That night, after putting Lily to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, trying to figure out our budget. No matter how I crunched the numbers, it didn't add up. We couldn't stay in the house. We couldn't maintain our current lifestyle. Everything was going to have to change. The realization hit me like a tidal wave, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I rushed outside, gulping in the cool night air. As I stood there, staring up at the stars, a memory flooded back to me. It was from college, before I met Mark. I'd been struggling in my economics class, overwhelmed by the complex theories and intimidating formulas. My professor had taken me aside after class one day. "Sarah," he'd said, his kind eyes twinkling behind thick glasses, "do you know what the most valuable asset in economics is?" I'd shaken my head, expecting him to say something about gold or oil. "It's human capital," he'd said. "The skills, knowledge, and experience that a person possesses. That's the most powerful economic force there is. Standing there in my backyard, those words echoed in my mind. Human capital. I had that. I was smart. I was educated. I was resilient. I could figure this out. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could control how I responded to it. I spent the day researching online courses, job opportunities, anything that could help me increase my earning potential. I discovered a program for teachers to get certified in educational administration. It would be tough, night classes, extra work, but it could lead to a significant pay increase. Without hesitation, I signed up. As the weeks passed, I fell into a new routine. Days were spent teaching and caring for Lily. Nights were devoted to my classes and studying. It was exhausting. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was moving forward instead of drowning. One evening, as I was poring over a particularly challenging assignment, Lily climbed into my lap. "Mommy, why are you always doing homework now?" she asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. I set my textbook aside, pulling her close. "Well, sweetie, remember how we talked about things changing? This is part of that change. Mommy's learning new things so she can get a better job and take care of us." Lily nodded solemnly. "Like when I learned to tie my shoes," I laughed, kissing the top of her head. "Exactly like that. It's hard work, but it's worth it." As I tucked her into bed that night, I felt a surge of love and protectiveness. We might have lost a lot, but we still had each other, and that was worth fighting for. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Between my classes, work, and caring for Lily, I barely had time to breathe. But slowly, surely, things started to improve. I excelled in my courses, earning top marks and glowing recommendations from my professors. At work, my principal noticed my increased dedication and knowledge, hinting at potential advancement opportunities. But the real turning point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a lesson when my phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. "Great news. Call me ASAP." As soon as the bell rang, I rushed to the teacher's lounge to make the call. "Sarah," my lawyer said, excitement evident in her voice, "we've had a breakthrough. The investigators have uncovered additional funds that Mark had hidden away. It's not everything, but it's significant, enough to potentially save the house and secure Lily's future." I sank into a chair, tears of relief streaming down my face. It wasn't a magic solution to all our problems, but it was hope, a lifeline when we needed it most. That evening, as Lily and I snuggled on the couch watching her favorite cartoon, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We still had a long road ahead, but for the first time in ages, I truly believed we were going to be okay. I looked down at Lily, her head resting on my shoulder, and made a silent promise. We would not just survive this, we would thrive, and someday, I would tell her the story of how we faced the storm together and came out stronger on the other side. As I stand here today, looking out at the sea of eager faces in the auditorium, I can hardly believe how far we've come. It's been 5 years since that fateful day when my world turned upside down, and yet it feels like a lifetime ago. "Good morning, everyone," I begin, my voice steady and confident. "As your new principal, I want to welcome you all to another exciting school year." The applause that follows brings a smile to my face. It's been a long journey to get here, but every struggle, every late night of studying, every tear shed was worth it for this moment. After my speech, as I'm walking back to my office, I catch a glimpse of my reflection in a trophy case. The woman staring back at me is a far cry from the broken, desperate person I was 5 years ago. My hair is styled in a sleek bob, my suit is crisp and professional, and there's a sparkle in my eyes that I thought I'd lost forever. Just then, my phone buzzes with a text from Lily. "Knock him dead. Mom? Love you?" I smile, my heart swelling with pride. Lily, now 12, has grown into a strong, compassionate young woman. She's weathered the storm of the past few years, with a resilience that never fails to amaze me. As I settle into my new office, my mind drifts back to the tumultuous journey that brought me here. After that ray of hope from the recovered funds, things slowly but surely started to turn around. The money we recovered wasn't enough to solve all our problems, but it gave us breathing room. We were able to keep the house, though it was a close call. I'll never forget the day we paid off the last of Mark's debts. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My night classes paid off too. Within a year, I was promoted to assistant principal at my school. The pay raise was a godsend, allowing me to start rebuilding our savings and even put a little aside for Lily's college fund. But it wasn't just about the money. The real change was in me. I discovered a strength and resilience I never knew I had. Every challenge became an opportunity to prove to myself and to Lily that we could overcome anything. Of course, it wasn't always easy. There were still nights when I cried myself to sleep, overwhelmed by the weight of single parenthood and the lingering pain of betrayal. But those nights became fewer and farther between as time passed. Mark's sentencing was a difficult day. Despite everything, a part of me still cared for the man I had once loved. Seeing him led away in handcuffs, knowing he would miss years of Lily's life, was heartbreaking. But it was also closure. A chapter of our lives definitively ended, allowing us to fully embrace our new beginning. Lily struggled with her father's absence, but therapy and our open, honest conversations helped her process her feelings. We made a pact to always be truthful with each other, no matter how difficult the subject. As for Rebecca and the baby, that situation resolved itself in an unexpected way. She reached out to me about a year after Mark's sentencing, her voice trembling on the phone. "I'm so sorry," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I lost the baby, and I realize now how foolish and selfish I was. You didn't deserve any of this." I was silent for a long moment, processing her words. The anger I'd held onto for so long slowly ebbed away, replaced by a strange sense of peace. "Thank you for calling," I finally said. "I hope you find healing and happiness." After I hung up, I cried. Not for Mark, not for the life we'd lost, but for all the pain and suffering that had rippled out from his actions. It was a cathartic cry, washing away the last of my bitterness and resentment. From that day on, I felt lighter. I threw myself into my work and my studies with renewed vigor. When the opportunity for the principal position opened up, I was ready. The interview process was grueling, but I walked in with my head held high, confident in my abilities and my vision for the school. Now, sitting at my new desk, I feel a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over me. I did it. We did it. Lily and I, we weathered the storm and came out stronger on the other side. Just then, there's a knock at my door. It's my assistant reminding me of a meeting with the school board. As I gather my papers, my eyes fall on the framed photo on my desk. Lily and me at her middle school graduation, both of us beaming at the camera. I pick up the photo, running my finger over Lily's smiling face. "We made it, baby girl," I whisper. "We made it." As I walk to the meeting, my heels clicking confidently on the polished floor, I can't help but reflect on how far I've come. From a betrayed wife and struggling single mother to a respected educator and leader. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was mine. Our story. And as I push open the door to the conference room, ready to shape the future of our school, I know that the best is yet to come. For me, for Lily, for all the students whose lives I now have the privilege of impacting. This isn't just a happy ending. It's a new beginning, and I'm ready for whatever challenges and triumphs lie ahead. Because now I know I am strong, I am resilient, and I am unstoppable. The woman who walked out of that courtroom 5 years ago, broken and scared, is gone. In her place stands a warrior, a survivor, a victor. And this is just the start of our next great adventure.